We are live, Beena. We are live.
Hello and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl. Good morning, Screen. Good morning to everyone who is watching us live and will watch us recorded. Welcome to Moreness Live.
Yes,
This
yes.
is
Good
the this
morning,
is the place
everyone.
we are creating. Yes,
Oh, welcome to Good Mornings Live. Wow.
yes,
Or
yes,
just to
and
welcome to Live Mornings. Yeah, I like
yes,
that. I like
yes,
that.
and it's like a kind of a redundant thing because Moreness is almost always good. I'm
Yes.
just keeping a margin for like maybe
But it's
sometimes
always
people
good.
do get
It's
it.
always nice.
Yes,
So it's
always good.
almost
This is
always
what I'm.
nice. It's always good. Right?
Yes, yes.
Right.
So
Uh,
yes, you can say that. I was just keeping a margin of some sort of things like always.
yeah.
That
Yeah.
okay, this could
Yeah.
be so.
We are
Goodness,
very cautious with absolutes. We are very cautious with
yes. So
absolutes,
Moreness
as is
is
appropriate.
exactly is almost always good, and this is what we are doing here by creating a space. This space
Yeah.
is free from any kind of shoulds. You are here
Correct.
because you choose to.
Correct.
We are here because we choose to. We are sharing
Exactly.
because we are sharing just only because of our choices we were making and we are making these choices every single day. It is a deliberate thing, but this is a deliberate choice we are making to be here and to share something. Yes, of course, the main in focus and the reason for is like right now, nowadays we are busy with a huge project by reading for the
Yeah.
reading of Don Carlos. No, sorry,
Yeah.
nope, nope. Carlos Castaneda's
Well,
books about
some people call him Don Carlos. Yeah.
about Don Juan,
Yeah.
and but as always, we follow the attunement. If something comes up which is like really
Yeah.
pressing, really
Yeah.
engaging, which needs to be elucidated, which needs to be like really talk about, share more, because otherwise it will create some confusion, some misunderstanding, then still definitely
Yeah.
he just come and he share his perspective. And also sometimes it is fun to do share that. We find so much fun and energy into this, and then we follow that. Okay, so yes, it is, there is no hard and fast rules here that okay, yes, we are trying to focus on books and we are doing this. We really enjoying this capital R reading process of this with a very clear and specific intent to connect with Don Juan and connect with the energy and of course the bigger picture, the bigger intent he has and he was sharing. We want to connect with that. But again, everything is coming via attunement, because even these
Yeah.
books, and the capital R reading always come up in our discussion via attunement. Not like okay, we were forcing something. It just happened. And
Correct.
this is how we
Always.
are doing.
Always.
And
Always via attunement.
also I'm the culprit here also because every
Yeah.
single time when I'm coming here on live, I am choosing not to think about what I'm going to actually share in my today's talk.
Very deliberately, yes.
Yes, and I'm practicing, of course, it's a very selfish business here. I'm practicing my abilities and of course trying to get acquire this
Yeah.
skill
Yeah. Yeah.
to be spontaneous and to share things like right now I'm doing.
Yes.
Before saying anything after hello and good morning, I had no idea what I'm going to talk about. So
Exactly.
my
Me
practice
neither.
is actually a practice of being with attunement or be in attunement. So
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
whatever is coming to me is coming via attunement. So how still cannot follow that? He has to be
Correct.
sometimes, of course, not necessarily all the
Exactly.
time, but sometimes it is like okay, oh my god, it is coming via attunement, so how can I not follow this? And I was thinking about
Everything.
that okay,
Everything.
my
Yeah.
my sharing of my thought of the day, specifically the way I'm doing it, is actually like okay, creating a bit of digression. But again,
Yeah.
this is what attunement is. And as far as I am understanding so far from Don Juan's sharing, attunement is a big deal. You cannot force anything.
It's huge. It's huge. It's
Even of
everything
course,
to Don Juan.
yes.
Everything. Yeah.
So we are actually practicing also.
Yeah.
Practicing Don Juan, really what he was sharing, and the intent, of course, and the core of his all his sharings. We are trying to
Yeah.
practice that too. So in our lives, everything comes via attunement. Sometimes, of course, if someone will come and say that, okay, oh yes, today I want to share something, and then if it is coming via attunement, then okay, you what how to check and what is the mechanism involved to understand that okay, it is coming via attunement. Of course, it is something innate into everyone. You can understand, you will understand immediately that it is coming by attunement or not, because a
Yeah.
lot of resistance will be there. You will have stress if it is not coming by attunement, and of course some other also. But in the simplest way, it's when there is no resistance, when you find so much engaging energy into this. Okay, yes, okay. So, and I have done everything. We were focused. We had very clear intent that we are going to read books of Carlos. But now this is something pressing. Okay, we will go with the flow. That's it. This is what we are doing. And I hope, Syl, that you are done with all your sharing and we can start with.
I was actually done with all the sharing, but then anomaly. See, attunement. So when I do this, we start on Zoom, and then we connect to Restream, which is exactly what it says. It's a service that allows us to stream live on multiple platforms, right? Because with Zoom, you can do it, but you can only do one at a time from Zoom. Like from Zoom, I can connect to Facebook or wherever, right? But Restream allows me to go multiple. So we connect Zoom to Restream, and then Restream, once I'm there, and I click go live, then it brings up a window in Facebook, and it goes to my profile, and the live is there on my individual profile. But from there, I share it to my group, the big group, right? Our group, the Sassy group, which is where everything is going on, right? And we share it there. And then I share it to my page also, because the page is dynamically linked to the website, and then it's live right now on my website as well as Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, right? And of course, it's live on my page, it's live in the group, and it's live on my profile as well. But then what I do is I go in group, I go to the listing, and I double click on the video part so that it brings up the comments on the side like that, and then I can see the comments in real time. Now I also see the comments in dashboard. They have a place there for the comments, which is very nice. But as I was looking for the post on the timeline of the group, where I normally kind of zoom in on it and look for the comments, I can't find it. It's not there. So I was scrolling down a little bit, and I noticed, wow, there's posts here that have a lot of links, and that are the advertising posts. Some advertising their book, it's on Amazon, whatever. And those, we don't allow that in the group, so I had to remove them real quick. Yeah. So I was a bit late getting up this morning for who knows what reason, so I didn't get a chance to do that. But just the attunement of it. And this guy, he posted 3 posts for his new book. It's like, come on, dude, really now, come on, seriously. Not only are you posting links and promotions, you spamming on top of it. I'm tempted to just kick him out of the group now. It's like, really? But it was quite anomalous that, and I see it in featured, it's there, the post, right? But in the regular things, it's not there, which is rather wild. So attunement led me to getting rid of those things, because we have an appointment immediately after the live. So, it might take another 2-3 hours before I get to come back and look at the group, and I don't want that stuff sitting there. So just very small, very minor attunement. It's a little bit of an anomaly, because I do the same thing every day, and the post is there, and it was in featured, so it's at the top, but it wasn't as a regular post. Why, I don't know. Very anomalous, but it was to my advantage, that anomaly. It was good. So when we pay attention like that, it's all good. All right. let us get going. We're on the last part of the book. Carlos's this first book, it's not very long, the first part, which he's recounting his apprenticeship. It takes place over 5 years. But it's a very, very selected focus on what Don Juan shares him. The actual important stuff that Don Juan shares goes right past Carlos, as we're going to see in books 2 and 3, which books 2 and 3, which are way longer, they're like regular length books. This first part was like 85 pages. So it's got 2 whole books go back over this time period. Yeah, where he now realizes, oh my gosh, I missed everything. I missed the importance, right? But the second part is the academic side of Carl's coming out. This is his thesis, right? That he did, his doctoral thesis to be an anthropologist. And we are seeing, well, the whole book was the thesis, yeah? But we see the structural analysis. This is now Carlos in full academic mode, and it's quite interesting to see. Brilliant, brilliant. So hello everybody, and I hope you all come. I sent a couple of invites to people, so you know that come regularly, just as a reminder. And what am I looking to do? Oh yeah, I gotta find the book now. There we go. There we go. I got a lot of windows open. There's lots of stuff going on. Just very busy, but it's all good to be busy. All right. So Carlos has divided up his knowledge into what's that, 4 or 5 units? I forget now. Four units, I think. Yeah, 4 units. All right. And it's fascinating to me how he comes up with this units idea. You know, it's, you know, what he's prioritized as important. It's fascinating. So we're going to start on the first unit here, which is man of knowledge, or person of knowledge, or sentience of knowledge. But he calls all of this the operative order. That just sounds very fancy and academic and intellectual and blah, right? And we're seeing into the world of academia. You got to make your stuff sound important, right? Otherwise, you can forget it. You know, it's one of the reasons I was so keen to go to university, but when I got there, I was massively disappointed and also disillusioned to a large extent because of things like this. The intent isn't to learn, to truly learn. No. Anyway, please, will you read, Beena? Please, will you read?
Okay, so I'm a bit busy in responding and taking care of something, so please, you continue.
All right, then, all right, okay, brilliant. All right, the operative order, the first unit, man of knowledge. Now, again, you know, look, is man of knowledge. It's not capitalized. And also, man of knowledge should be, you know, just according to utilizing English fully and appropriately. In the way that Don Juan uses this term, man of knowledge needs to be hyphenated as well. It is a thing in and of itself, right? A man of knowledge, 3 different words, would be a man that is literally built of knowledge, like you would say a man of flesh and bone. See? So which is obviously not correct, but also a man of knowledge, that could just be like Rain Man from the movie Rain Man, right? Rain Man was full of knowledge, not what Don Juan means, correct? I mean, he had all the data and information in him, right? But he's not a man of knowledge as Don Juan means it. So when we look at Rain Man as a man of knowledge, yes, which is stuff inside him, facts. In other words, a human hard drive, a human database. Yeah. When you put it 3 words, it's a human database. When you put the hyphens, it becomes a thing which has a moreness meaning to it than literally a person that is of knowledge, or as close to that literal as is obvious in the context, because we can't be physically made of knowledge, right? So man of knowledge obviously refers to the mental, intellectual side of it. But the difference between man of knowledge hyphenated and man of knowledge separate is a very profound difference. The difference between Don Juan, who's a man of knowledge, and Rain Man is from one extreme to the other. So this is what we do in Way of Impeccability, in Moreness-Culture, and in the language of conceptionality. Because right there, man of knowledge is a conception, a very important, very powerful conception. And it's a conception that is particular to Don Juan because he has very particular requirements that comprise what he means by a man of knowledge. He also will grant you that if you make man of knowledge into a conception with the hyphens, that there are other paths, there are other ways to becoming a man of knowledge or a person of knowledge or a sentience of knowledge, as I would prefer to call it. His path isn't the only one, but he has very specific requirements in his view as to how. Not because he thinks this is the best or the only, but because it's what he knows. Don Juan has made this point, and or at least he will make this, and he's kind of not said it so specifically, but he has already said it in this book, but he will say it very much in other books, right? That he doesn't necessarily insist on things that this is the best. He's insisting because this is what he knows. He's able to insist. Very big difference, right? So we have to look at things, when we look at Don Juan, via a deeply, intensely, profoundly ethical point of view. Don Juan's integrity does not allow him to say this is the best. His integrity forces him to say this is the best according to me and what I know. I can't make a claim about something that I know nothing about, right? Alternative paths, I may have some idea, but I can't state it definitively, see? So this is very key to Don Juan's ethics, and we follow that same ethical understanding. This has always been important to me, long before I even used the word ethics or impeccability. It's to call it rightness internally, right? And impeccability and rightness, they have a lot of overlap, but impeccability is a much better term than rightness. Because rightness connects to morality and the big quagmire and mess that morality is, right? Especially religious morality. There's a lot of stuff that comes into it, and it's all about control and manipulation. It's not really about what is actually appropriate living. All right, so man of knowledge, and when we read this, we will now, at least to me, in my mind, and I hope anybody listening, read it as a hyphenated term. I don't think I can edit this one. On the other book, the other version of the book that I have, I can actually edit. I can't do so on this one. But this one, it comes out, it's easier to read for us than the other one. Right. The first unit, man of knowledge. At a very early stage of my apprenticeship, Don Juan made the statement that the goal of his teachings was to show how to become a man of knowledge. Now look at this. Look at this. How this was a statement at the very early part of his apprenticeship, but it didn't connect with Carlos. It wasn't the focus for him. The focus of the book wasn't about all the things that Don Juan said about how to become a man of knowledge. We have a few, I don't know, less than a dozen. I know there's more from the later books, but if you read this book, you don't read it and see that, oh, this is about Carlos becoming a man of knowledge and Don Juan teaching him to become a man of knowledge. It's secondary to the focus on the power plants, peyote and the little smoke and the devil's weed. Yeah? That is what the book is all about. That's where the focus is. That's where the importance is, not on becoming a man of knowledge. Yes, now he's emphasizing this, but when you read the book, it's not emphasized. So we have to be very, very alert and attentive to what is and what isn't emphasized. Simply because the author was taken in by this, and he made this massive emphasis on what wasn't the important thing, even though he says it here. he didn't do so. Yeah, it's really fascinating. So in other words, what people say and what they do and what they mean, they don't always coincide. This is why we do and practice capital R readings, right? We start again. I'm going quite a bit in depth in the capital R reading because this is such a key point here. It's very key to understand, especially in this first book, that Carlos gets it wrong. Even though it's there, it's right there for him, but he still gets it wrong, right? I mean, if you go back in the book, yes, you're emphasizing it now, Carlos, but man, boy, did you miss the boat? And this is crucial to understand. Why? Because I am very cautious to 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 make sure anybody who listens to this, right, and reads this book, that they don't get the wrong idea, as so many that I've encountered. The majority of people that I've encountered that have read Carlos, at least the first book, yeah. Oh yeah, it's all about the drugs. That's it. That's typical. That's the typical thing. Carlos, all about the drugs. Even though they may have read books 2 and 3, which it's not emphasized. That's what's stuck in their mind, this first impression. Now, I'll go a little bit further, and I will say that the power that Don Juan shares, it is absolutely all of it. It rests on impeccability. So for me, this way this book comes, even though Carlos gets it wrong, the universe does not. When we look at this first book, and Beena started today with talking about attunement, and it's very interesting. So did I, in a completely separate thing. Before I was chatting with Beena. Well, we didn't actually talk about attunement. Somebody had messaged me, and I also said, no, I'm doing it because of attunement, right? And everything I do is because of attunement. So attunement really kind of was our theme of the day. When we look at this book from Carlos's point of view, and we see how Carlos gets it wrong, but we look at it from the universe point of view, and now we start to attune to universal perspective. And we see the universe, in my mind, obviously does not ever get anything wrong. So why is this book so peculiarly, anomalously focused on the drugs? I think it's a test of discernment. There is enough juice, as it were, power in the man of knowledge comments, the person of knowledge comments that Don Juan does make. And when he talks about the path with heart, for instance, and a few other things, right? Those are so profound. And they make it, for me, I was like, okay, let's get past all this other stuff. It's fascinating, but I can't use it, right? It's like a test to see how serious you are about real, true learning. Can you get through this? Can you get past it? Can you get past the misimpression? Can you get past the inappropriate emphasis? If you only see this and you only remember the drug part and you ignore the rest, well, you're not going to really continue reading in books 2 and 3, because that's where your interest is. Yes, it's there, but it's not the prime focus. And as the thing goes on, this gets less and less. But if that's where your mindset is, then you're not going to go much further with this. You won't get to the real depths. If you have the discernment and the integrity to absolutely make this discernment and see the value and carry over, your emphasis, your focus is going to be on what's really important. And the point of this is, you would say, yeah, but why wouldn't the universe want everybody to learn? Because much of knowledge, with knowledge comes power. And if you don't have integrity and the appropriate intent, that power can become misused. And it can end up being harmful to you. Yeah. So there needs to be a kind of a test to sort things out of it. And I've seen this time and time again, over and over again. And when we look at this entire book series as a product of attunement, as the universe working through Carlos, it changes everything. Changes everything. One thing that struck me at this right in the beginning was how these books were categorized in libraries and bookstores. Because I wasn't around when the first book got thing, but when I started reading, I think 5 had been published. Yes, 5. So I was in the midst of reading them. Well, by that time I was rereading them, and when the book, and I remember when it happened, it was very attuned. It was a very peculiar thing for me. On the way to the supermarket, I mean, I walked very regularly. The bookstore that I bought from, because these were new, they weren't around used. At least we are looking for the new ones, right? Because I knew there was more coming, and at least I hoped so. And I was pretty sure because the story was finished. And I don't think it said there's another one coming, but it was kind of clear that there would be more. I walked past this store, and as I was like just passing the middle, right, at the middle of the doorway was right in line with my shoulder. As I crossed right on that, I felt a pull, a physical pull from the store. And I knew that the next book in the series was there. And I went in and there it was. I never had anything like that happen to me before. And I can't recall anything similar, at least not in a by way of a pull. Now, if you this is complete and utter attunement. There's no other way to describe that, right? So anyway, off I went and got the book. It was a very big deal for me. It was very remarkable. But it also made me pay attention to where the book was. There wasn't a shelf for it. And I think it was at that time still, I think it was on a shelf of new releases that had just come out, actually. It wasn't even categorized yet. But they would put it in anthropology and Native American teachings and all sorts of different places. The first book, they put in anthropology and Native American teaching. But after that, it went in all, so whatever category you can imagine, philosophy, spiritual, you name it, under hallucinogenics, it was always in a different place. What is the attunement value of this? It puts it in front of the greatest possible audience. It's fascinating, right? Connecting to your intent. All right, and attunement, very powerful. So this, at the very early stage of my apprentice, Don Juan made the statement that the goal of his teachings was to show how to become a man of knowledge. I use that statement as a point of departure. It is obvious that to become a man of knowledge was the operational goal. It is also obvious that every part of Don Juan's orderly teachings was geared to fulfill that role in one way or another. Every part. Yes. So Carlos is sharing more here than what he shares at the time, right? Because this is now 5-6 years later. No, 7. He published this in 7 or 8 years later, right? So there's, when this is published, there's quite a gap that's taken place after he says he's discontinued the apprenticeship. It doesn't mean he stopped going to see Don Juan. He didn't. He continued to see Don Juan, but he still says, well, Don Juan didn't take any notice of this statement of his of discontinuing the apprenticeship. Don Juan didn't take that seriously at all. He just took it as a pause, right? A power pause. My line of reasoning here is that under the circumstances, man of knowledge, in inverted commas here, being an operational goal, must have been indispensable to explaining some operative order, again in inverted commas. Now, for the first man of knowledge, he puts it in single inverted commas, and operative order gets into double inverted. Yeah, that's very interesting. Quotation box. Then, it is justifiable to conclude that in order to understand that operative order, one has to understand its objective, man of knowledge. Very complicated way of saying you need some clarity of intent here. Yes? Don Juan's intent was to teach Carlos how to be a man of knowledge, right? That's it. When you understand it as an intent, then all of this stuff with operative order and all this, it's like, man, intellectual stuff that is a bit of a time wasting. Don Juan was very clear in his intent. He had great clarity of intent in this. Yes. After having established man of knowledge as the first structural unit, it was possible for me to arrange with assurance the following 7 concepts as its proper components. 1, to become a man of knowledge was a matter of learning. 2, a man of knowledge had unbending intent. very important. I mean, the first one is like, duh, right? But the second one is very important. A man of knowledge had unbending intent. 3, a man of knowledge had clarity of mind. Yes, clarity of intent is better than clarity of mind, but all right, yeah, we'll go there. I mean, it's a huge difference. Clarity of mind does not mean you have clarity of intent. Clarity of intent, on the other hand, implies and means that you have clarity of mind. Yeah. So clarity of intent supersedes clarity of mind. 4, to become a man of knowledge was a matter of strenuous labor, effort required. 5, a man of knowledge was a warrior. Now look at this. Look at this. This word warrior, how often has it been used before this? Indirectly, once or twice. But here it is mentioned as an important part. But nowhere before this do we have any idea what this means as a warrior. At this point, oh, he's a warrior. What kind of weapons does he walk around with? Yeah. At this point, if you don't know what's coming in the future, to say a man of knowledge was a warrior, he's a soldier. It's like, well, how does this make any sense? Yeah. I mean, you could say, all right, I have to assume that he means warrior in a figurative sense, not in a literal sense, but there's nothing to indicate this. So it's like, wow. But furthermore, the fact that this is absolutely true and super, super critical, and he mentions it here, but he's not included anything to substantiate this in the story that was told. It's an omission that is quite absolutely fascinating. Yeah. It just blows my mind. 6, to become a man of knowledge was an unceasing process. We are perpetual aspirants in the language of Nobelia, yes, and in Moreness-Culture, right? Which is a much an easier way to assimilate this unceasing process. And that's, oh my gosh, that's stressful. To be a perpetual aspirant, this is a joy. Yeah, because we always immersed in the joy of discovery, the joy of learning, the awe of uncovering moreness. But as an aspirant, we are enough. But we are also more. See, we make that difference. Unceasing process. This is just this is Sisyphean again, to use that word I used yesterday. Yeah, like never-ending labor that is just onerous, right? So we have to pay attention to language usage, and particularly, very important in Moreness-Culture, we are paying particular attention to implication, especially extrapolative implication. Yeah, very important, very important. Implications are a big deal. The way that is written, to become a man of knowledge was an unceasing process. You've already talked about unbending intent, but now it's an unceasing process. Now you're just making it into a chore, into a labor, into a stressful thing. And 7, a man of knowledge had an ally. That is actually not exactly a requisite. It was common, but it wasn't necessary. Don Juan said so. Anyway, but Carlos didn't hear that, even though he wrote it in his own notes. He wrote it in the story earlier. It's not indispensable, but in this context here, these are the components, right? Yeah, the proper components. As a component, this is like a requirement, but it's not, right? So again, see, precision, capital R reading. Carlos contradicts himself even in a way. I mean, yes, he quotes Don Juan, but he doesn't hear. He doesn't properly hear. And so he just assumes it's an absolute. It's not. It's not. These 7 concepts were themes. They ran through the teachings, determining the character of Don Juan's entire knowledge, insomuch as the operational goal of his teachings was to produce a man of knowledge. Everything he taught was imbued with the specific characteristics of each of the 7 themes. Together they construed the concept, man of knowledge. You see, now, this is very interesting that there's actually a typo here. There's a space there, see? Man of knowledge. Very interesting. Together they construed the concept, man of knowledge. See, Carlos, if you're utilizing your language appropriately, now is when man of knowledge needs to be hyphenated. You don't have to capitalize it. This is a bonus for extra emphasis. But there, instead of putting man of knowledge into quotation marks, you could still do the quotation marks, but absolutely the hyphenation is required, right? Because you are now stating it is a concept, a conception. Very important. Together they construed the concept man of knowledge as a way of conducting oneself and way of behaving that was the end result of a long and hazardous training. This is very peculiar that the ampersand is here. Very odd, very anomalous, right? A way of conducting myself and way of behaving that was the end result of a long and hazardous training. Man of knowledge, however, was not a guide to behavior, but a set of principles encompassing all the unordinary circumstances pertinent to the knowledge being taught. Beena, what do you think of that statement? Right, this one here, man of knowledge, however, was not a guide. Say again, you still busy? You still busy?
No, please. No, please continue.
Oh, I'm asking, what do you think of this sentence here? Man of knowledge, however, was not a guide to behavior, but a set of principles encompassing all the unordinary circumstances pertinent to the knowledge being taught.
Yes. It is actually like, okay, not following the should. Yes, like, okay, yes, right. Use your own sensibility.
Right. And also, he's saying it could be said in a much simpler way. Man of knowledge was not a guide to behavior, or in other words, personality, but it was about character training. Yes. A man of knowledge is another word for man of character or person of character. Yeah. Very complicated way of saying something very simple. I make this point because this is what you and I are now sharing. We are sharing a sophisticated extension, not just of Carlos and Don Juan, mostly Carlos and Carlos's way of communicating. Also later, we'll see with Don Juan, we're bringing more. But one of the things that we are bringing is this refinement of language. Yes, to say things and take it all the way to the end. And when we understand man of knowledge to mean a person of character, changes everything. Changes everything, yes. And when you have character, yes, you will come to also possess knowledge that matters, knowledge that is power, not knowledge that is information only, because as Don Juan said, what is the point of knowledge that is useless? Yeah. So for Don Juan, knowledge means useful information, whereas knowledge in our world in general does not mean that, right? Encyclopedia is full of knowledge, not all useful to me. Yeah. See? So it's about useful knowledge. Yeah, very important. A character is always useful. That which defines character, which are qualities, abilities, yes? They require some knowledge in some cases, but once you've implemented it, it becomes second nature. But I just wanted to point this out, right? That language is very important. And this language of conceptionality, which is so another way of saying way of impeccability, and is so key to Moreness-Culture. Moreness-Culture, just the word Moreness is already bringing a Moreness of language, the language of conceptionality. Moreness is a conception. Right? Each of the 7 themes was composed in turn of various other concepts which covered their different facets. Again, we're in this intellectual speak, Beena, which makes it all sound very important, yes?
Yes.
And that's the agenda, is to impress the lecturers, and they need to feel that this sounds important, because that's part of their job also. When they publish and put out, it's all about sounding important. Yes, your thing actually has to have some actual value also, but you cannot write actual value in a very simple way. Then, no, sorry, that you won't pass, you won't get your doctorate. No, it has to also sound important. This is a very, very important criteria. It's absolutely crucial. Yeah, because the university's prestige is online, and this gets published, and it's it was put out, and when this was published at UCLA, this was part of the thesis and the book, and they get the prestige from it, blah blah blah. It's all about prestige and importance and looking clever. The agenda is flawed. So I said to you, I was very disillusioned, right, when I went to university. The agenda there was not learning, but this kind of thing. Yes, intellectual importance. No, not for me. Thank you very much. I want to actually learn. I want to actually change, not just have words in my head. That is quite pointless, right? From Don Juan's statements, to continue, from Don Juan's statements, it was possible to assume that a man of knowledge could be a diablero, that is, a black sorcerer. He stated that his teacher was a diablero, and so was he in the past, although he had ceased to be concerned with certain aspects of the practice of sorcery. Now, Don Juan implied this, but didn't say it directly, at least not in what we read before. He says it later on, it comes again, because the later books are the same period of time, but from a different perspective. But this is very important, right, to understand this. And you don't need to assume that a man of knowledge could be a diablero. Don Juan clearly said it, that the two are separate. They could coincide, but they aren't the same thing, right? It's like it's the extra skill set to be a diablero. The real issue was a man of knowledge, not to be a diablero, right? So Carlos, again, is not applying capital H hearing here, yes, to absolutely hear what Don Juan said, right? He stated that his teacher was a diablero, and so was he in the past, although he had ceased to be concerned with certain aspects of the practice of sorcery. Since the goal of his teaching was to show how to become a man of knowledge, and since his knowledge consisted of being a diablero, there may have been an inherent connection, spelled with an X, not a T, between man of knowledge and diablero. Although Don Juan never used the two terms interchangeably, the likelihood that they were connected raised the possibility that man of knowledge, with its 7 themes and their component concept covered, theoretically, all the circumstances that might have arisen in the course of becoming a diablero. Boy, this intellectual writing, it's very pedantic and complex and a lot of verbiage. Now we get to see what verbiage means, right? All of this here, just verbiage now, right? I mean, again, those 7 themes, Don Juan never said, hey, my teachings comprise these 7 themes. This is a classification that you are ascribing to Don Juan. Yeah. So don't confuse it, Carlos. This is you putting those 7 themes. They don't necessarily belong to Don Juan. And it's very clear and obvious when you listen to Don Juan that a diablero is a particular part that's part of his history, his lineage teaching. It's not a necessary requirement for man of knowledge. As a matter of fact, it can be quite distracting, Don Juan had said, right? It's a potential negative. He's only sharing it because this is what he knows. And he was taught that, so he's passing it on, right? Now, anyway, to become a man of knowledge was a matter of learning. The first theme made it implicit that learning was the only possible way of becoming a man of knowledge. Isn't that kind of a duh?
Yes.
I mean, how else are you going to become a man of knowledge if not via learning?
Exactly.
I mean, it's just completely redundant.
Yes.
You must well say the sky is blue. Anyway.
But it is again no, there is something into it. Maybe not well articulated over here, but actually okay, yes, there is no shortcuts. Maybe the intent is to saying that okay, it is to
that's the implication. Learning. Yes, correct.
Yes,
correct.
And again, okay, there is nothing like okay, someone can hand it over to you. No, it has to be learned.
Correct. You can't be gifted. Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. The way it's written is, it sounds great, but when you think about it and you apply thinking through to the end, apply perspective shifting to multiple perspectives, okay, this was something that requires your effort and you need to make it your own. That's what it really means. You can't just become a man of knowledge by acquiring the information and putting it on your database. See? So when we go to the end of what this means, not what it says. What it says is like, well, duh. But what it means is actually very important. Yeah? This is the power of the language of conceptionality and the extra that we bring to this. Yes? We go all the way. And it's a very powerful extra at making it your own. It's a huge deal. It's an incredible power conception. That again, it's hyphenated because it's a thing. Yes, it's an important concept, making it your own. It's a concept. It's a concept. Very huge. The first theme made it implicit that learning was the only possible way of becoming a man of knowledge. And that in turn implied the act of making a resolute effort to achieve the end. Yeah, you have to have the intent, in other words. To become a man of knowledge, that's resolute effort, that's intent, right? Isn't that a nice way of saying intent? Resolute effort, Beena?
Yes.
Or I would say resolute committed effort, or effort of commitment. Yes, you put commitment in there. Resolute implies it, but you can be resolute but not be committed. Committed means you're going to go to the end. Yes. And resolute means that you're going to be persisting all the time. See? So when you put resolute and commitment together, and you get intent, right? The effort. To become a man of knowledge was the end result of a process, as opposed to an immediate acquisition through an act of grace or through bestowal by supernatural powers. Now here we get what you were saying, see? Being given to you. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. The plausibility of learning how to become a man of knowledge warranted the existence of a system for teaching one how to accomplish it. What a wonderfully fanciful statement that, again, says nothing really, right? But this is Carlos in intellectual mode, right? The first theme had three components. By the way, I may sound very negative to academia. And in some ways, I am critical of them. Not necessarily negative, but critical. Because they do huff and puff and fuss and bother and miss the boat. Because they are more concerned on the whole with, yes, with real value knowledge, but also presenting it in this very self-important way, very egotistical way. And that diminishes the value of the knowledge they share profoundly. Yeah. And you get all of this redundant unnecessariness of this fancy language, which it's like, to what end? All you're doing is saying, I'm clever, I'm clever, I'm clever. And your agenda is to be clever and appear clever, not to learn. And that's what saddened me. That, like when I went to psychology class especially, you saw the psychology lecturers knew all about psychology, but their personal lives were a mess. They thought knowing was enough to somehow make them okay. Oh, you got to apply it, right? That resolute effort. They didn't apply their knowledge. And it was a cliche. It was a joke that all the psychology professors were psychology professors because their personal lives were a mess. That's why they were interested in psychology, to fix themselves, but they never succeeded because they never applied. They thought the intellectual was enough, and it's not. And that is my critique of academia, that they do not understand the necessity of capital A application. And you end up with this nonsense because the agenda, the intent is off. Your agenda is not to actually learn, but to sound like you know. Not good enough, sorry. The first theme had three components. One, there were no overt requirements for becoming a man of knowledge. Very important point. There were no overt requirements for becoming a man of knowledge. This is open to everybody, in other words, and that's very important. For Don Juan, you can't just go up to Don Juan and say, I want to be your apprentice. I mean, you can do that, but that doesn't mean he's going to accept you as one. He has to have the universe give him a sign. He has to have an omen, in his words. There has to be, him accepting you will have to come about from attunement. And that may not necessarily be enough. He'd have to have some anomalous indication that this is something for him to do. Yeah. So this, but to be a man of, become a man of knowledge, to get on that path of being a person of knowledge, this is open to anybody, right? You don't have to go via Don Juan. There were no covert there were some covert requirements. That's very interesting, right? So non-obvious covert, right? Hidden. The decision as who could learn to become a man of knowledge was made by an impersonal power. This is basically attunement. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. At least in the context of being an apprentice to becoming one. Yes, you can decide all of your own to become a man of knowledge. You don't need attunement to get you to do that. Why? Because if you are paying at least even the tiniest, it doesn't matter, even if you're aware of the universal intent for everyone to be a person of knowledge. All you're doing when you're saying, I want to be a man of knowledge, is you are now aligning with the pre-existing attunement. That's it. The universal intent is for all of us to be people of knowledge, sentiences of knowledge. Yes, that's it. So it's anybody can do this, and you automatically attuning. So you don't have to wait for attunement to put this to you. When you decide to become a person of knowledge, you are now aligning with the pre-existing intent and attuning to that intent. Right. So it's an act of attunement. Yeah? Very important to understand. Very important. But this is missing at this point, the intent of the universe. Yeah, very important. Apparently, there were no overt prerequisites that would have determined who was or who was not qualified to learn how to become a man of knowledge. Ideally, the task was open to anybody who wished to pursue it. Yet, in practice, such a stand was inconsistent with the fact that Don Juan, as a teacher, selected his apprentices. Not correct. Carlos, Don Juan did not select his apprentices. It's incorrect. Don Juan paid attention to attunement. Attunement selected the apprentices. Don Juan aligned to that attunement and took on the apprentice. There's no personal choice involved. Right? And Carlos does not understand this yet. And even though it was quite clear, but he doesn't understand it yet. Again, I may be bringing from the following books that it was clear. I don't think in this book the story of that first meeting in the bus station in Nogales. That story is going to be repeated pretty much in every single book in the introduction, but you get a little bit extra every time. And then later we get Don Juan's comments on that as well, where he says, the fact that you were introduced to me by a fool, he's Carlos's friend, that was significant. That was anomalous to Don Juan, the way the whole thing took place, and this made him pay attention, right? So, and then Carlos playing the fool on top of that by pretending to know about peyote when it was very obvious that he didn't, again, was anomalous to Don Juan, and this made him pay attention, right? In fact, any teacher under the circumstances would have selected his apprentices by means of matching them against some covert prerequisites. And yeah, these covert prerequisites, Carlos is assuming these are like criteria that are pre-established. The covert prerequisites are anomalies. It's not a list of things. Oh, the apprentice must have cross eyes. The apprentice must not be shorter than 3 feet tall. God knows what, all right? I'm just making up ridiculous things. But it's not that kind of a thing, right? Or, you know, they must have a desire to learn. That could be a covert prerequisite. No, whether or not Carlos had a desire to actually learn was irrelevant. If the universe says to Don Juan, hey, you need to take him on as apprentice, whether Carlos wanted to learn or not, Don Juan would have had to find ways to get Carlos to learn whether he wanted to or not, which in a lot of cases is the issue with Carlos. He's very reluctant to learn. Right? The specific nature of these prerequisites was never formalized, right? And that's why, because you cannot formalize the criteria that make for attunement. That's why I call them anomalies. An anomaly rather than an omen, because an omen has this assumption that it is predetermined. I mean, that's the meaning of omen. it says that specifically, right? But still I use assumption that it can be predetermined. It's not actually, it's a mistaken assumption. It's a completely mistaken assumption. So you get this mess of, well, it means this, it means that. No, anomaly is each and every time it is new, different, anomalous, out of the ordinary, unusual, exceptional, not repeated. Yes, it may be similar, but it's each time is individual and unique. So much more potent than omens. So much more potent because it's usable. So of course, those prerequisites, in other words, when you come to the anomaly, it's not a prerequisite. It's telling you in that moment how to act. Yes, and they cannot ever be formalized. Omens is an attempt to formalize anomalies. And it's totally invalid. It doesn't actually work. Yeah, as I've mentioned before, and it will come up again. This is a big theme, and this is a massive shift, and it's one of the absolute profound enhancements that come through language of conceptionality and way of impeccability. This understanding of anomalies and how they relate and connect to attunement and alignment, which is the act of acting according to the anomaly and utilizing what you have attuned to. Yes, very, very important. Very, 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 very important. I mean, it's a significant advance in the understanding of this. It changes everything, right? We'll get to this topic a lot. The specific nature of these prerequisites was never formalized. Don Juan only insinuated that there were certain clues what that one had to bear in mind when viewing a prospective apprentice. And the clues are pointing out anomalies. There had to be an anomaly, right? That's it. It's very simple. That's the clue, the anomaly. The clues he alluded to were supposed to reveal whether or not the candidate had a certain disposition of character, which Don Juan called unbending intent. Yeah. Now that's hard to know just by yourself. Yeah, because such type of perception deep into the character of someone, especially when you don't know them very well in the early stages of them being apprentices, you don't have the luxury of getting to know them for 3 to 6 months or a year, or however long it takes to really get to know if they have unbending intent. So you need to rely on something other than your perceptive ability, no matter how skilled it may be. Yeah. And the universe, via anomalies, is going to tell you not necessarily that the apprentice has unbending intent, but that this person can be an apprentice. If they can be an apprentice, by implication, they have unbending intent, or the ability to acquire this, the ability to implement this, right? They might not have the unbending intent at that initially, but they have the ability to cultivate this quality, right? And just to be very clear here, we need this clarity again, or clarity of intent. Nevertheless, the final decisions in matters of who could learn to become a man of knowledge was left to an impersonal power that was known to Don Juan. Now, Carlos thinks that Don Juan is asking the ally or Mescalito. He doesn't think of it as the universe. Yeah, he's not thinking bigger and broader yet. Yeah, he doesn't think of it as life, the universe, or rather a better term is intent, capital I, intent. That is what decides. Intent as a force, an individual force that exists, just exists, that is, and that from that intent comes the universe. Very important to make this distinction. Yeah, it's a difficult concept to grasp, but you know, when you look at physics, they say 90% or whatever, some majority percentage. I've seen the percentage vary, but of the universe is comprised of dark matter, and they don't know what the heck dark matter is. Nobody knows. But if you change that word dark matter, which is a very negative sounding term, and say the universe is comprised of something, the majority of the universe is comprised of something we don't know what it is. If you say, oh, that's intent, I know what it is, it's intent. Holy moly, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. Now it all makes sense. So when you think of the universe being composed of intent, changes everything. Nevertheless, the final decision in matters of who could learn to become a man of knowledge was left to an impersonal power that was known to Don Juan, but was outside his sphere of volition. You can't influence intent. You can't influence the universe. Right? So it's not like, well, I don't know, if you can influence the ally or the devil's weed, potentially you could have some influence on the devil's weed, maybe, but certainly not on Mescalito. Yeah, but this is not what this attunement. No, Mescalito is also subject to attunement. Let me make that statement again. It's not made by Don Juan. This is me coming from my perspective. Mescalito is a part of the universe, and as such, it is subject to attunement. Yeah, right, Beena? Make sense? Doesn't matter how powerful and how awesome and how incredible Mescalito is, it is still not the universe, and as such, subject to attunement. Yes? Do you agree, Beena? Or no? Where'd you go? You're not muted, but I'm not hearing you respond. All right. Was outside his sphere of volition. The impersonal power was credited with pointing out the right person by allowing him.
It was breaking. Say it again, please.
Oh, I was saying Mescalito,
Yes.
as awesome as Mescalito is, which is an entity that exists of their own accord, rather than the ally of the smoke, which really doesn't really have its own personality or character. It's more mechanical. And the devil's weed has a personality, but again, it's a more mechanical thing. Whereas Mescalito is a self-contained entity. Mescalito is still subject to attunement.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very important to understand. And of course, in my whole story, The Council of the Gods, a big part of that story is the gods sharing how they did not understand this at first, and how it caused them great suffering. Tremendous, right? They really paid the price for their arrogance, for their hubris, of not understanding. Hubris, by its definition, by the way, does not apply to gods, because hubris is arrogance that is inappropriate for your station, your place in the hierarchy. Yeah. So you can be arrogant as a human, like you're a king or a queen, and it's, well, kings and queens, it's sort of accepted and expected even for them to have arrogance. This is part of what the king and the queen traditionally, most people's perception of kings and queens, it goes hand in hand with being arrogant. Or in today's world, being a CEO, right, of a major big company. This is accepted arrogance. Yeah? Now, it carries various degrees with it. Right? It can be egregious or just all sort of part of their confidence. But when you start to say and have an arrogance that's challenging the gods, now it becomes hubris, because it's arrogance that's above your station. And by definition, for the gods, they are the apex. You cannot be arrogant beyond your station. Of course, you can, relative to the universe, and this they discover. And that's what hubris is. Hubris is this arrogance beyond your station, right? So they discover in the story that they have been completely immersed in a hubris, and they didn't realize it, right? They didn't realize that this was inappropriate, because they thought, I'm at the top of the apex. They assume that I can do whatever I like. No, you cannot. You're still subject to the universe. Yeah. Very important. A very, very important point here. Very important point. Nevertheless, the final decision in matters of who could learn to become a man of knowledge was left to an impersonal power that was not known to Don Juan, but was outside his sphere of volition. And when we understand this to be the universe or intent, it changes everything, rather than a deity or a spirit or something like that, right? The impersonal power was credited with pointing out the right person by allowing him to perform a deed of extraordinary nature, or by creating a set of peculiar circumstances around that person. See, now we start to see the elements. If Carlos had really thought it through to the end, he would have understood this as anomalous. It is the anomalousness that gives you the clue to know to pay attention. Yes, that's the key.
Yes.
It is because we can pay attention to everything, but the anomaly says this merits particular attention. This has significance. This has meaning because there's anomaly involved, right? But to understand this, we have to go really deep into that whole session of way of impeccability. But you need all the basics before that, right? You need to have your integrity squared away. You need to have your clarity of thinking squared away. You need to have association management squared away, etc. All the other things, right? So a lot of stuff to do before you get there. Hence, there was never conflict between the absence of overt prerequisites and the existence of undisclosed covert prerequisites. The man who was singled out in that manner became the apprentice. Don Juan called him the escogido, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the one who was chosen. But to be an escogido meant more than to be a mere apprentice. An escogido, by the sheer act of being selected by a power, was considered already to be different from ordinary men. He was considered already to be the recipient of a minimum amount of power, which was supposed to be augmented by learning. All right, so I really struggle with this men thing. Yes, it bothers me. Yeah, because it indicates a lack of awareness that's important, right? I mean, yes, I understand when Don Juan is talking and Carlos, and they say he because Don Juan is a he and Carlos is a he. But in this context, no, right? Because there are female apprentices that are coming to it later on. So where are they? This should be the person, they, right? They are different from ordinary people, not men, right? It's this inadvertent misogyny. It really bothers me, and not because, well, inherently yes, but mainly because of the lack of discernment that it reveals. This bubbleness that you aren't paying attention to the implication of your words, and you're almost self-contradicting to yourself. Yeah. Anyway. It's very bothersome, right? And if you at this stage in Carlos's world, I'll bet you anything if you asked him, well, later we're going to see he has already met, I believe he has met some of the female apprentices, but at some point he had not. And if you would have asked him, could Don Juan have a female apprentice, he likely would have said no. Yeah, or at least in the question, well, I never thought about it. I just sort of assumed it was only men, right? That's the danger of this stuff. It creates that assumption. All right, if somebody asks the question, well, now that you ask, well, I kind of have to say yes, but nonetheless, he was operating on the assumption that it was just men because of language like this. It's really very, very, very limiting and detrimental. It's not good at all, right? So the point here is, if you need to be an apprentice, or if from the teacher's point of view, the apprentice has to have this minimum amount of power, because this is a very serious activity that you are undertaking. Yeah. Now, I personally feel earnestness, the sufficient amount of earnestness will bring you that power. That is what earnestness is. It is the connection to the power that is necessary to it elevates your power. It augments your power, right? And it puts you in a situation where you get attention. So to me, earnestness is the quality, and you cannot fake earnestness. That's its very nature. It is unfakeable. Yeah. Does that make sense what I'm saying about earnestness, Beena, as a power conception,
Yes.
capital
Yes.
E earnestness, right?
Yes.
Because that minimum amount of power is absolutely crucial. But the implication here is, and it's part of this superiority paradigm hierarchy, the implication that he was this potential apprentice, they were considered already to be the recipient of a minimum amount of power. And that means that you're special. In other words, right, Beena? that you have some
Yes.
quality, some talent, some skill, some inherent advantage or superiority. In other words, that you were special in some way and that enabled you to be apprentice. I cannot see this as being part of the universe. I cannot see this. Sorry. I cannot see this. To me, this has to be open to anybody. The minimum amount of power is absolutely crucial. That's going to be augmented by learning. But I don't believe it's something that comes inherently as something that you're born with or whatever. No. Through earnestness, you can acquire that. Very important. I was going to say Don Juan, Don Ross, Don Joseph says, in the Uto Aztecan language group is Yaquis and Where I Live. Oh, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah. Uto Aztecan language group, Yaquis and Where I Live. That's very interesting. I didn't know that you were down that way. I thought you were more north, right? Anyway, and Where I Live. In the local language, he and she pronouns aren't really spoken. That's fantastic. That's fantastic to hear, Joseph. This is fantastic to hear, right? Context lets you know who you are talking about usually. So the word for medicine man is actually in a related native language considered non-gender. I love that. I love that. I love it. And to me, this is appropriate, right? You know, it's this whole gender thing. It bothers me inordinately, right? And when you hear my language, I say they. I very seldom say he or she, unless I'm now need to be specific. But almost always I will say they. Yeah. Again, I'm not. The they can be whatever gender. And when I say sentience, I don't mean human. I mean any sentience. Yeah.
Yes.
I have had some experience with sentient beings who were not human. Yes, there was Horse Person, very fantastic story that I wrote, and more in a smaller way with a dog. Fiero was his name. Yeah, that had an awareness that was different to what you would expect. But Horse Person, Horse Person had an intent, and Horse Person completely behaved in a way that is completely anomalous to horses. And I know horses. I worked on horse farms, right? I grew up riding horses. I know horses. Yeah. So it's that's an incredible story. So my point is that, you know, I try to be universal when I talk about sentience. Yeah. I mean, actually, technically, sentience is not it's actually sapience, but because the word has become sapience is almost never used. And when people say sentience, they mean sapience, but all right, you know, sometimes you have to make an allowance for language. All right, we'll leave it here on a man of knowledge and unbending intent, because we've got a call in a little bit here. But I love that sharing, yes. Joseph. Thank you very much. That's a very cool point. And I love this. I love this. You know, this whole gender thing, it really bothers me. Like I said, you know, it's the inadvertent implication that is the issue. And we are paying particular attention to inadvertent implication in the same way, not only with the gender point, but the same way of this sentence here, right? He was, not they were, the apprentice considered already, or the potential apprentice considered already to be a recipient of a minimum amount of power. It is again that impliedness of specialness. Yeah. And so when we look at inadvertent implications, it is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly powerful. In other words, only special people could be an apprentice. Sorry, I don't see that when you are looking at freedom, at awareness taken to its maximum as the intent of the universe. Sorry, the universe says, yes, you've got to do something special in order to cross the barrier, because you are crossing a barrier into power. And power cannot be available to those that lack integrity, not real power. The power that we think of like dictators, this is a power that isn't inherent to themselves. They cannot force themselves to be a dictator. They can only become a dictator with the acquiescence of everybody else around them. So if you have a dictator in your world, well, then you've got to bear some responsibility for this. See? But when you have real true power, you can force people to be subservient to you. And the universe will not allow that. The universe will not allow that. Yes? So when you suffering from a dictator, well, but they forced me to do. Yeah, but you allow that forcing. See? So you're responsible. And that's a very important point that we have to learn as human beings. We think of it from an enhancement of awareness point of view. Well, I can't do anything on my own. Well, sometimes you can as an individual. But what you can do is you can start a movement. You can start an uprising. All of those things, they started with individuals. Yeah. They may have arisen spontaneously in different places, but you can organize. In other words, the greater point is collaboration, right? You can get together with others. You may not be the leader or ringleader. You may just be collaborating and say, yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. And that's enough. The collaboration is what the key point is for overturning dictators. You collaborate with everybody who goes along and suffers. You're collaborating in being the victims of them. See? But you can collaborate in not being the victims. So this is an important understanding when we look at actual real capital P power and simple dominance power, which is a power given by people to a specific individual. Yeah? We give that power. We give that power. But real power, there's a criteria for it, and that criteria is impeccability. The universe won't allow it, because that's, like I said, that's a complete and utter mess. Cannot be. And this is my story of the Council of the Gods, right? Those gods had real power, and they completely abused it and messed it up, and it cost them dearly. Now, there is a large measure of it from a old God's point of view, from a religious point of view, that the same thing, through ascribing and subscribing to the religions of the time, that was a religion of you giving your power to the deity. You didn't have to. And when we go really back, at least, mostly when we think of old gods in Western civilization, we think of the Greek gods. Yeah. And there's a big story here, and Homer's stories is exactly about this issue of the gods and their inappropriate abuse of power. Yes, and the story of Odysseus, his hubris. It's where the word originates, really, as popular usage. His hubris, which led to his travails on his way home, because he said to the gods, "What are you doing? You abusing your power." I'm paraphrasing, but he said this whole war is a bunch of rubbish and a bunch of nonsense based on the idleness and petty, absolute petty motivations of the gods. Right? He called them out for being pathetic and ridiculous, and it changed because his story showed that living was not a condition dependent on the gods. You could exercise your own will, and through intelligence and strategy, you could overcome the nonsense, right? Which put humans now on a whole different plateau and perspective relative to the gods. You were not at their mercy. You were not completely at their mercy. It was very powerful stuff. So again, when we look at this bigger universal perspective, we start to see things change, right? And this is the key. It's the key to Way-Of-Impeccability. It's the key to the language of conceptionality, is to look at matters from universal perspective, overview perspective, same thing, yes? Overview from the absolute overview, universal. Yeah, very, very, very powerful. I love that, Joseph. Thank you for that share. That actually is very enheartening. It lifts my heart to hear that. I love that. Just as a point of interest before we go, and while Beena wraps up here, Joseph, what is the actual word in your particular language, one of that language group, the word for medicine person? I'm just as a curiosity. I'm just it's like to know stuff. Yeah. All right, Beena, any closing comments here, please?
Oh, yes. So today, actually, thank you so much for sharing, because today we explore much more than what you actually read, because
Yes.
And your understanding about the kind of like discrimination towards women, and also their understanding of that, how to how yes, and also that how Don Juan was choosing apprentice. It was like, okay, he was not actually choosing anything or anyone. He was just following the attunement. Okay, if it is coming by attunement and I have to be part of it in this particular way, I'm doing it. So I'm not like, okay, I'm going to choose any apprentice. And also that very interesting about Carlos being reluctant to be an apprentice, which is like very interesting because you know that how I have been through about that some with the people and they how they were trying to get me, and I was like, no, I don't want to, I don't want
You were a most earnest, eager, enthusiastic, and appropriate apprentice.
Yes, I was like, no, sorry.
Unbelievably so. Unbelievably so.
Yes,
Awesomely
but then,
so. Incredibly so.
and then
And
this is
see, it
again
was your
very,
earnest intent, Beena, that
yes,
made the difference.
yes, yes,
To answer my question,
yes,
Joseph says the word for medicine person is Makai or Mamakai, singular and plural. And Norma says, thank you, Syl and Beena. Thank you, Norma. Thank you, Norma,
thank you,
for being
Norma.
here.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you,
Makai
Joseph.
or Mamakai. Okay.
Makai
I
or
love this.
Mamakai? Singular. So a Makai
This?
is the singular and Mamakai is the plural. Yeah?
Yes. And we call corn in Urdu, we call makai.
You call what Makai?
Corn. Corn.
Corn.
Yes.
Corn,
Corn
maize, corn.
yes,
Right? That
maize.
you eat.
Yes. Yes. In
Wow.
Urdu, it is called makai.
Wow. Wow. Now, corn obviously is massive in Native American culture and it has spiritual significance. I love this.
Yes. And
This and corn is medicine. It's very related. Very related. Fantastic. Fantastic. Ma stressed in the first one. So it's Makai, not Makai. All right. So this important the syllabus. Yeah, I'm going by English pronunciation of emphasis. Right. So thank you for that. So it's Makai. Makai. No. There. Makai. 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 Makai.
We are trying our best, Joseph. We are trying our best.
Yeah. Makai. Makai. Yeah. Yeah, Makai,
thank you
not
so
Makai.
Much for sharing. Thank you
See,
so much,
Makai
Norma,
has got the accent on the K, but it's the accents on the Makai. Yeah, Makai. All right. And Mamakai.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Not Mamakai, Mamaki. Sorry. See, I read it wrong there. Mamaki, not Mamakai. Mamaki. Mamaki. Is that an L? Am I reading it wrong? Malai. I imagine you typed there. Yeah, there we go. Makai. Yes, Makai. So it's like almost stretched to two eyes. Oh, I love this. I love this. Makai. Makai. Yeah. So Don Juan is a Makai or Don Juan is Makai?
Yes.
I'm asking this because in the usage, I imagine the right? It's not needed. You could just say, yeah, Mama Kai. Oh, it is Mama Kai, not Mama Ka. Mama Ki. Yeah, it's plural. Yeah. But I imagine you would say Don Juan is Makai, not a Makai. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I like to test. I like to test my assumptions, to how I imagine things to work because I'm tapping into an underlying logic of stuff. And when you can do that, it's very useful, right? But I always test it. I always check it just so that you can refine your understanding. Very, very cool. All right.
Okay. We have something to take care of, Syl.
Yes.
So,
yes. We have an appointment. Yes, we have to go. I'm watching the time, Beena. I'm watching the time.
It is something that someone messaged you and the server.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, we'll take care of all of that. And,
yes. So please do take care of it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and it was fun. And thank you. Okay, we will keep practicing Makai, Mamakai. Okay, Makai, which is in Hindi also Makali. Yes.
Brilliant. I just want to say real quickly again, hello, shout out to Samantha Barnes. Nice to see you again here. This is fantastic. And Danny Gelly, Inezi, or I believe you've been with us before, Inezi, and Dushkatari. We, of course, know very well. Dushkatari is a fabulous, wonderful person. And we've got Ferraro who joined us. So fantastic that we had all on IG. Absolutely wonderful. And I
Yes.
miss Christopher Abbott, so I hope we see Christopher Abbott again. And of course, Norma,
Yes.
who's such a joy that we know, and Joseph. I always love it when you guys are here. You bring so much. You bring so much. And you know, just even just your thank you there, Norma. It brings a lot. It brings a lot. It's just small things. Small things make a difference. I love this. I love this. What Joseph shared. It really lifts my heart to know that somewhere we don't have this unnecessary divisionness. Yes, and that's not necessarily that I'm against, you know, misogyny only. Misandry is equally egregious. I, you see it in uh, um, hyenas, a female-dominated society. Yeah. So any type of in dominance, hierarchy, superiority, it's a dead end culture. This is what it's dead end. It's self-defeating. It goes nowhere. It's a square circle culture. Right? The idea is there, but the practical application cannot happen. And that's where my remonstrance is directed towards. Yeah. All right, since we're in intellectual mode, we'll say a bit of fanciness there. But it's me being appropriate rather than trying to be fancy. Right? All right, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. See you guys all tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we shall connect tomorrow, right, Beena?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye, bye, everybody. Bye, bye. And live video.